Sorry. Morning, Charlotte. Hey, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Special Committee on Housing. We have 3 bills planned for executive session today, and that should cover all of our House bills that we've received. And we currently have 1 Senate bill in our possession, but I was going to wait until later to see if we receive any more. I know there's a couple more housing-related bills going on in the Senate that I'd like to see here. So with that, we're going to get started with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So the first bill on the agenda I'm going to call is the executive session on HB 1215, and I will recognize Representative Wallace.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've got an amendment, the correct amendment this time, that I circulated to committee last evening. Hopefully you've all seen it. It's due down from the 4th floor. And basically it does address the issues we talked about, extending the 5-year term to 10 on plot plans, and making sure that only the zoning ordinances in effect at the time of issuance are the ones that are going to be used to issue certificates of occupancy and final completions of projects. That amendment number is 1080H, and we're just waiting for that, and I will be moving that amendment, so I think once we get the actual paper copy, we can proceed.
I didn't realize we didn't have the paper copy. I thought you had
It's
it.
coming from downstairs, from upstairs at this point. Carrie just went to get it.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. So we're gonna go.
Recess this one.
Yeah,
and
I'm gonna
go to
recess this one. I
1399.
didn't realize we'd have the paper copy.
Yep.
So I'm gonna recess that one, and I'm gonna do open the exec on 1291, and I'll recognize Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move ought to pass.
Ought to pass. Representative Reed moves ought to pass.
And further, I move, oh, wait a second, which one is it? I also move amendment number 1150H and would like to speak to my motion, but
Is there a second, Representative Damon? Okay. One question I have is,
If I may, this is 1291. This is 1291. I think it's 1149H.
so I have 2 separate amendments and then I prepared one that combined the both. So I moved the one that combined the 2 different amendments and I was about to talk about that.
Okay, because it's titled 1292.
it says on the top 1292.
Oh, wow.
Hence my confusion.
That is a typo.
And I don't have the amendment, the new amendment at all.
They are moving down the line, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So that is a typo from OLS.
Thank you.
Because that is not the correct bill. But I would still like to speak to the amendments in concept.
Okay, go ahead.
So last time, when in our discussions, we talked about the one amendment that I brought forward that you have from last time, which changed. We had talked about this last year in our multiple discussion sessions about what parking requirements should be required on, or towns would be able to require on an ADU. And most of the committee, to my recollection, was in favor of 1 parking spot per unit. In an attempt to get the entire committee into consensus, we changed that to allow 1 per bedroom. However, we ended up not getting full consensus on the bill anyway. And in order to keep this bill in line with the bill that we just passed, which would only require 1 parking spot per dwelling, or allow a town to only require 1 parking spot per dwelling, I've changed that back to one parking spot per unit rather than per bedroom. And if you think about it, we talked a lot about, well, who is needing a parking spot? If you have two bedrooms, very likely, very frequently rather, a lot of that. And we are intentionally trying to make these ADUs larger so that they can be long-term kind of family-based housing options for people. And so if you have kids, they are likely not driving. So that made a lot of sense. And in fact, towns don't always and usually don't require even one parking spot per bedroom on a stick-built single-family house. So it seemed really overburdensome to allow them to require one per bedroom on an ADU. So to keep it in line with the bill that we just passed, and for all the reasons I just mentioned, I have the one amendment that changes it back to one per unit. Further, and this will be the language in the amendment 1149, which should have just been passed around. So this is the second concept of an amendment. We, as a committee, just passed a bill kind of showing our support for having options of manufactured housing. The current ADU law says that ADUs, a municipality may prohibit accessory dwelling units associated with multiple single-family dwellings attached to each other, such as townhouses. That makes perfect sense. You don't want two ADUs per townhouse then you'd end up with like 12 units. And then it says, and with manufactured housing. And so I struck that, and it looks like a big amendment because it's duplicating the entire paragraph, but the only change is on line 16, where the strike through and with manufactured housing. And the reason, other than our committee's clear conceptual support of increasing opportunities with manufactured housing, it really doesn't make sense to deny an ADU associated with a single manufactured housing unit on its own land. Because right now, for example, a stick-built house can have an ADU that is a manufactured house, but a manufactured house can't have a stick-built, even though the stick-built would be smaller than the other way around. In either case, you would have one stick-built and one manufactured house on a property, but we allow one direction and not the other direction. It didn't really make much sense. If that is a manufactured house, we've spoke at length about how the quality of manufactured housing not only has come a very long way, but in many cases, the modern manufactured housing is actually better quality than a lot of the stick-builts available, that it really doesn't make sense to unfairly penalize people who have chosen a manufactured house for cost and quality, both, by prohibiting them from having an ADU associated with their home. So for that reason, I just struck through and with manufactured housing. And there you have it. I did reference the RSA 674. I went and looked that up, and it was just the definition of manufactured housing. It wasn't specific to like on its own land or anything. So the amendment that is improperly numbered, which I will get corrected, combines those two concepts in one.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to because it changes the same language. We can adopt that amendment onto the.
We can adopt, I've been told, and the reason I created the third one, we can adopt both separate amendments separately, and then OLS has to prepare a combined amendment, and then we have to adopt that. So that's why I went ahead and tried to have it prepared ahead of time for the speed and convenience of the committee, but apparently my efforts failed.
Okay, are there comments on this amendment? Representative McConkey.
Thank you. And going to your.
You just turn your mic on.
Thank you. And going to your amendment 1149 and the last discussion you just had, starting on line 15, municipality may prohibit accessory dwelling associated with multiple single-family dwellings attached to each other, such as townhouses. Did that also say at the time and manufactured housing, or are you now saying that it's okay by right to do it in manufactured housing?
The existing, so everything that's not bold in this is existing law. The existing law allows municipalities, I should say, to prohibit ADUs associated with single family dwellings attached to each other, such as townhouses. That makes a lot of sense because if you have like a fourplex, then every single one of those units were to have a right to 2 ADUs, you would be kind of getting into crazy territory. So that was fine. But the existing law also prohibits ADUs associated with manufactured housing. And we heard a lot of testimony about how manufactured housing has come a long way and is better quality. And it doesn't make sense to penalize someone who has bought manufactured housing on their own land, on a foundation, just like anything else. And by prohibiting them from having an ADU, that did not make sense. All the other restrictions on ADUs would apply, so they would still have to. The town would be allowed to require that one of their 2, if they had 2 ADUs, one of them would be attached. All of the other things would still apply. We're just not unfairly penalizing people who happen to have a manufactured home on their own land rather than a stick built on their own land. And as I said, it doesn't make sense because right now, if you have a stick built, you can have a manufactured home as your ADU. But if you have a manufactured home, you can't have a stick built as your ADU, even though in both situations you would end up with one manufactured and one stick built on the same piece of land. So that's why I put that in.
Follow.
Struck it out.
Thank you, Representative, and that's a wonderful conversation. I just want to bring you back to my question. So are you now permitting the ADU to be built on, because I see the line crossed out, with manufactured housing? Is that what you're attempting to do?
Correct.
Okay, so can I follow up with one last question? So I wouldn't have a problem with a private subdivision, a private piece of land that has a manufactured house. I don't have a problem with that. That's good. My question comes, and maybe perhaps it would go to, well, I'll ask you first. In a manufactured home park, this could have horrible consequences. So explain to me how you're making this known that manufactured housing parks are excluded, or are you trying to keep them included in your piece of legislation?
Thank you. My understanding, and the reason I didn't parse it out, is that parks and subdivisions can have their own rules beyond what the town can do. I would like to call upon the chair to ask Mr. Frost to come up and verify that, but that is why I did not go into detail, because I do agree with you that in many of these parks, the lots are too small and having 2 ADUs would be onerous for each manufactured housing unit. But having said that, I am of the understanding that a park and a subdivision can have its own rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Frost. I'm the Deputy Executive Director, Chief Legal Officer at New Hampshire Housing. To the colloquy between Representatives Reed and McConkey, yes, parks, in particular, parks can have their own rules that would, in effect, prohibit accessory dwelling units associated with each unit in a park. It's very similar to a homeowners association, which could also have similar rules that prohibit ADUs. Those override any consideration of zoning because it's not inconsistent with zoning. It's a private contract, really, among in the case of a park, between the park owner and the unit owners. In the case of a homeowners association, among the owners in that association. So it's very similar to that. In a manufactured housing park subdivision, and I'll note there are, I think, very few such things in New Hampshire. I don't think there are many communities that have adopted manufactured housing park subdivision standards that are different from stick-built or modular home standards. But I know there are a couple of them. There, I think it would be up to the municipality to decide the correct lot size for that if it were to accommodate an accessory dwelling unit, because in many regards, a manufactured housing park subdivision is not much different than a regular subdivision. It's just the fact that it has manufactured housing on it. So I don't think that's an issue. And honestly, Representative McConkey, you're asking that question is the first time I've heard that concern raised since the ADU law was adopted and this provision of it was adopted. The prohibition against townhouses and manufactured housing, or giving municipalities the ability to do that, was a subsequent amendment to the ADU law adopted in 2017, the year after the ADU law went into effect. But I've never heard that concern raised, and I don't think it's a concern of municipalities.
Okay, so that's my point, and I appreciate you coming forward. So I shouldn't be concerned about that.
That is my belief, yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Of course. Anyone else? Representative Reed.
I just wanted to add to Mr. Frost's comments, as he is well aware, in the bill, we are allowing towns to require a half acre. So in the subdivisions that were mentioned, a town could require a half acre, which is big enough for an attached and one detached ADU.
Okay, is there, so let me ask, is the intention to move HB 1 or Amendment 1150, even though the top says it's amendment to 1292?
If the chair would prefer, I mean, I can email OLS right now or call OLS, step out if you want to recess, but if the chair would prefer, we can try to adopt each individual amendment separately and then try to move forward.
Let me ask other chairs for guidance.
It's,
Representative Walsh.
there's no substance.
Because it's just a technical error, I think you could act on the amendment so long as the motion was specific to getting the correction made. Your other option would be, you've got two individuals that have accurate numbers. If you acted on them individually, it's just a matter of going back to OLS, which you need to do anyway to get them merged, because they have to be merged as a committee amendment.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, can you rescind your moving 1150 and move those amendments separately, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I withdraw my motion to adopt 1150.
Okay. Is there a different motion?
I would move to adopt only because it's in front of me right now. I move to adopt amendment number 1149.
Representative Damon, would you like a second?
Thank you.
Any discussion on that?
I believe I just covered, this is the one that simply strikes out the words "and with manufactured housing." So we basically covered that and the issues around that. So I think I'm all right unless people have concerns.
Are there any other comments on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, is show of hands, okay? Sure. All's in favor? Any opposed? Was it opposed?
I'm not going to debate the amendments.
Okay. All right. Yes, the amendment's been adopted. Is there another amendment you'd like to move?
I would like to move amendment number 0730. That was passed out last time. This is the amendment that changes the parking from one per bedroom to one per unit. And
0730.
0730. Do I have a second? Oh, thank you.
So moved by Representative Reed, second by Representative Damon. Okay, any more discussion on this amendment? Representative Ochello.
Hey, can you remind me of the bill that you are trying, the bill number of the bill that you are trying to be in parallelism with, that we already said one, no more than one per unit, or one per dwelling unit? Yes, right?
Yes, and I'm 1400. Which, if the chair wants to verify, I believe we adopted an amendment for and passed last time.
Yes. Okay. Is everyone ready to vote on this? Seeing nothing is simple. Is ought to pass on the just the amendment. Okay, all those in favor of amendment number 0730H, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay, 9-1, the motion carries. The amendment's been adopted. So now we're on the ought to pass as amended motion, adopting amendments 1149H and 0730H, which OLS will put together provided this passes. So is there discussion on the ought to pass as amended motion? Go ahead, Representative Walsh.
I will not belabor it because I don't believe this is any surprise, but I will not be supporting this. Nothing has changed since what I said on day one of this committee, is that I cannot, with my experience on the planning board for almost 13 years, adopt top-down, one-size-fits-all state mandates on our municipalities. Local control, I know we talk about it all the time, I think is critical in these matters. That's why even at the local level, understanding that you don't have one-size-fits-all work there either, there is a waiver process and a variance process. Once you put things in statute, that all goes away. And secondly, looking at just how this would work. And Mr. Frost in the past has said we do a good job in Hooksett, and I apologize because I keep referring to it, but that's my closest experience, is that we do a good job. And I look at this half acre with mandating municipalities to do this, particularly in our conservation subdivisions, in our cluster subdivisions, all our smaller subdivisions now, potentially, the density would skyrocket. I just cannot see how this is going to work without severe problems and quite honestly, not fair to the people that are already have those properties. If something like this gets adopted, I hope all your local boards of assessors are prepared for the line at the door, looking for relief from their property taxes, because once you have a ranch that's 1,000 square feet, just so you know, a 2640 ranch is just over 1,000 square feet. So we're not looking at ADUs here. We're looking at homes sandwiched in between people's swimming pools. There is going to be a detrimental effect on the surrounding people's properties for those of the people that put these in. Look, I came on this committee looking for solutions. I think we did a lot of good work on that in terms of streamlining and making things more affordable. But this, I just could never get behind. And so, a lot of people can. Even the New Hampshire Municipal Association is not behind these bills either. It just goes too far. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a comment with regard to the parking issue and something that was brought up in our last meeting, that once something was built, that increased parking could not be added. And in fact, I know that once something has been built, if increased parking is needed, increased parking can be added. And the reason that I know this is that I live in a condo development that was built with one parking space per unit. And quite recently, within the last year or so, the driveways and parking spaces were resurfaced. And while they did that, they created 3 additional parking spaces for visitors. So this was long after it had been built because I moved into it in 1988. And as I said, within the last year, increased parking was created as part of the process of resurfacing the parking spaces. So I just wanted to add that.
Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to address some of the comments that had been made. So this is not a one-size-fits-all. This is a floor that we have already put on municipalities to accept one ADU and allowed certain restrictions. And we are changing that floor because we are in a housing crisis and we have to. Because you can talk about like, well, we like the look of this or the that or whatever, but when it comes to it, as what, similar to the comment that was made last time, we don't have a parking crisis, we have a housing crisis. We don't have an aesthetics crisis, we have a housing crisis. We don't have a, barriers around our swimming pools crisis. We have a people cannot live in this state and we can't keep people who can work in this state crisis. So it's not one size fits all. There are abilities for towns to restrict this and that. And there is still power within the municipality. And if you heard NHMA's opposition to the bill, they actually supported several aspects of the bill because I worked very closely with them. Having said that, for people who have been planning these communities for a decade or 2 decades or bought their homes a decade or 2 decades ago, the housing situation looks very, very, very different now. Very different. And we are at the point that we are going to cause a collapse of our economy in New Hampshire because we won't have workers in 10 or 20 years. The cluster issue and conservation, the half acre does provide those, barriers around your swimming pools or what have you. I mean, even in that statement alone kind of like tells, like we're worried about how much room is in around our swimming pool, but we're not worried about people going on the street. Like that's a little telling. But the conservation issue, it's not going to be overly clustered or overly dense because that town can still require a half acre, which is not that much. I want to be very clear that the 2 ADUs does not, I think people are thinking there's going to be one house and then 2 extra houses on the same lot. That's not what this does because one can be required to be attached. So what you can have at maximum, if a town uses their power to restrict it, you might at most have either a house with an extension, so it's still one house with an extra house, a smaller house, and 1,000 square feet is nobody's idea of a big house. Or you'll have a house with a detached garage, which you don't know an ADU is in, and then one extra house. So there's no ability or no forcing of towns to allow a property with a house with 2 extra houses or like 3 house structures on one property. That's not the case. And I just want to be clear about that because I think that was a misunderstanding. But the fact of the matter is this is the gentlest density. I love everything this committee has done. We have not fixed the housing crisis. We have not made housing affordable in this state with the parking and the couple things that we've passed. So we haven't fixed the housing problem here. This will get in the least impactful and easiest way, get to that Victory Garden approach, that decentralized owners are building at their own time scale. It's not going to be a mad rush on second ADUs. We don't even have a mad rush on first ADUs because of the restrictions, right? So it's going to be gentle over time where you don't even see that there's an ADU going in that garage or an ADU being built onto that house. But we are going to provide, and I think the number was something like, and this came from, who testified? They figured out the number that might be over time added in terms of our housing. I think they said something like 90,000 units could be built, or based on the percentages of people who currently add ADUs. That would really kind of fix our housing shortage issue. Maybe not the affordability issue, but the shortage issue certainly, and affect the affordability. So for all those reasons, I think that the concerns that have been raised are not from an objective standpoint in what's in the best interest of this state and what's in the best interest of property owners. And I will close by saying, once again, of all the solutions that we talk about, this is the only one that I've seen legitimately with the ability to pass that will help people buy homes. Because it's not just renting homes that, yes, that would be a Band-Aid on our housing issue if people could afford rent. But what we want in this state is home ownership. What young people with families moving to this state to work in this state want is home ownership. This allows them to own a home because they might have rental income that helps them defray the cost of a mortgage. This is amazing. We should be doing this. And so with that, I will just end there.
Okay, thank you, Representative Reed. I'm going to call on Representative McConkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's passion and there's going over the top. And I will stand with my fellow chair. who has the right to say whatever he wishes and not to be, in my opinion, berated. I was a strong yes on this, but I'm going to tell you after that, I may not hold that position. We all come to this committee from different point of views. We all came to this committee wanting to make a difference. Whether we get there as 10-0 or 9-1 or 9-2, we need to look at every amendment and every bill and make a determination. And I would appreciate it if we could condense some of this conversation, speak to the bill and not to the passion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for anyone who felt that my remarks were personally disrespectful or insulting. I believe all of my remarks, at least my intention, was to stay with the concept of the bill and the purpose and intent of the bill and the reason that the bill is needed. I don't believe I spoke to anybody personally, but if anyone felt that way, that was not my intention to hurt anyone's feelings or make them feel disrespected. And I certainly believe in not disrespecting my fellow committee members, regardless of their opinion on a bill.
Thank you for that. Representative Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you didn't hurt my feelings, but I was insulted by the comments because it was clear you were directing that to me. Just let me give you another perspective on why I still have an opposition to this. And again, thank you for that, Representative. We do come here with different perspectives. I have two when I make my position on this clear. I live on a half-acre lot, and I'm also a builder. So when I can say to you that if I took my house on a half-acre lot and put an attached and a detached on it, there is no room for anything else. If this bill actually said a higher lot dimension or a larger lot dimension, I might actually look at it differently. But starting at a half-inch with allowing basically 3 units on it, I'd see as a disaster. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative O'Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the comments from the committee so far. My thoughts on this bill are a couple things. I wanted to address a couple of things that were mentioned. One was regarding the concern about the value of people's homes going down if there was ADUs in their area. I personally don't, I have not seen any evidence of that with the ADUs that we have currently. And I actually fundamentally disagree with the idea that you have a right to the value of your property, on the open market. But even if that is an accepted reason for denial of variances and stuff like that, I still being on my town's zoning board of adjustments, I've never seen someone successfully argue that their value of their property is reduced by any of the proposals actually coming before me. They may make some claims, but they've never actually proven that is actually going to harm their value. And definitely not for ADUs. My thoughts on the size requirement is that with the second ADU, I think there already is a provision that allows a municipality to require larger lots. But I think that the main value in this bill is not actually the second ADU as much as it is the first ADU, because you can't get to the second ADU until you get the first ADU, and so my issue with our structure in this state right now is that when we did limit the ADU or the municipality's right to restrict your personal right to ADU on your property, we made the municipality, take its hands off a little bit. Unfortunately, we did not actually make them take their hands off enough that people were actually able to make ADUs in the situations that they had on the ground, whether that be a detached garage that's where they wanted to put the ADU, instead of, building on an addition, which we've heard can cost an enormous amount of money or a substantial amount of money, where putting it inside an existing structure, as someone that actually probably lived in what would be called an illegal ADU in another state, inside of a garage that didn't have permits and all of that stuff, was very relatively cheap to put in, because the garage already had a heater and the garage already had other walls and insulation and stuff like that making an additional couple of walls to put that ADU inside of the garage was much less intensive than the $100,000 that we've heard quoted in this. We're talking under probably $10,000 that this, couple of walls, some insulation, and some 2x4s, and some carpeting, and a light fixture, made another room that I was able to stay in. And so I think that in some sense, I do believe that that this is definitely more affordable, and I am most supportive of the change of detached to be outside of existing structures, right? And saying that if you're in, that detached garage that is 5 feet away from your 5 feet away from your actual living space, that you don't have to build that corridor in between to make it attached before you can put the ADU in. That you can just put that ADU in that space if that's where it is appropriate based according to the property owner. I value that. I think that is a significant change, and I think that coming down from the unreasonable amount of allowing 4 parking spaces for an ADU is a huge success. And so I think those barriers that the municipalities put in the way of people utilizing the existing law is, I believe, outweighs any potential issue that people could have with having a second ADU. I think there's flaws in the first ADU law that this bill seeks to remedy. So I think that's why I will be supporting it. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I vigorously support this bill, although I do appreciate the concerns that have been noted. I think we need to remind ourselves, not only does it make it more possible for first homeowners, probably younger folks, to in fact own property, it helps elderly people stay in place because they can put in an ADU for folks to help them if they have care needs as they age, or to make it affordable for them to stay where they are. And we heard poignant, many testimonies from the disabled community about how valuable this would be to those folks to have 2 ADUs so that parents, a disabled offspring adult, and a caregiver for that person could all have their separate living spaces on the property. I think that's a community that we really need to be addressing. It's not small and it's not unimportant. There are other reasons as well, but particularly for the opportunity for elderly people to age in place and for disabled people to live well in a comfortable and appropriate environment, I am vigorously supportive.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also strongly support this bill, and I just wanted to go into the question of what the property owner might choose to build, because I do think it should be the choice of the property owner whether that owner would choose to build 2 ADUs or something else. The owner might choose to build 1 ADU and a garage, or 1 ADU and a swimming pool, or 1 ADU and something else. I don't know what. My point is that it should be the choice of the property owner, so that even if the house, the original house, and 2 ADUs would take up all the space, that should be the choice of the property owner, not my choice or your choice or the choice of the zoning board, but rather the choice of the property owner, so long as that property owner isn't interfering with anyone else.
Thank you, Representative Baruti, and then Representative DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being a realtor, I've seen a lot of things. I remember one of the last, back before the housing crisis, I listed a property with an in-law apartment. Of course, we don't have them anymore. But before the housing crisis, when I took a house a couple of months to sell, I listed a house with an in-law apartment. And I had like 12 calls on it. This are people bringing in their elderly parents instead of sending them to a nursing home. They want them in their home so, they can take care of them themselves. And there was a high demand and very, very few properties like that. This would take care of that. With the housing crisis today and affordability, it has another role. Young people can't afford an apartment on their own. They want to go back home, but if I'm a 28 or a 30-year-old, I don't want to live with my parents, so give me my own space. And I think it brings in the elderly so that the family can take care of them, and it takes care of the younger people who are having a hard time making it out there, and there's a lot more of them now. Back when we had in-law apartments, we had a shortage of units like this. We have a real shortage of units now. So I think this would help out in multiple ways. Thank you.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like we're at an impasse, and I want this committee to decide what do we feel can work. It sounds like we're talking about parking, we're talking about, 2 ADUs, 1 ADU, whatever. What's gonna work? Where can we compromise so that we can get this done? I think we put a lot of work into this. Representative Reed has put in an enormous amount of work in this, and I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because we can't agree on, what the model should be. Thank you.
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. I'm sorry to disagree with Representative DiLorenzo, but my feeling is we should vote on what we have in front of us before we talk about whether there's a need for compromise. Perhaps there is, and I'm not putting down any of the concerns that we've had. These are obviously real concerns, but I think we should have a try at voting on what's in front of us and then see where we go from there.
Okay, I'm gonna
Quick thing.
quick.
I just wanted, because I forgot because we postponed this, but the testimony from the person last week about essentially being fearful about their living situation long term, and that an ADU was essentially kind of creating that hope and that bridge of consistency and stuff like that, was a really powerful testimony to me. And I think that, that kind of goes along with what Representative Damon was talking about as far as the disability community needing that support. And so for I just wanted to acknowledge that was, and just bringing my mind back to that testimony, and it was very powerful to me. And I think that it's worth to just remember that.
So I grew up in a single family neighborhood in Concord, and it's up on the east side. So if you know anything about Concord, there's a lot of very nice single family neighborhood. There's the Concord Country Club. I did not live there, but like I lived up in that area. Beautiful single family neighborhood. It was built like a little bit at a time, and my house happened to be the last one built. But the acres, I just texted my dad. I was like, I want to know quickly, this kind of neighborhood, what was the acreage on our property, which is one of the largest ones. It was 0.32 of an acre. It was a beautiful neighborhood, 0.32 of an acre. And, you had that cookie cutter colonial houses up there. I think that's still important that we preserve that. I truly do. I think that's a part of our identity, especially up here in the Northeast. And I think the language in here allows that to be preserved, right? Because you have a single family neighborhood with a 0.32 of an acre, 0.4 of an acre. Municipalities are allowed to say you cannot do this on anything lower than 0.5 of an acre. So the language in here allows for this single family neighborhood idea that we already have and like we support and we love, but also allows the freedom of a property owner that has a larger property. They can build that. And I also want to just point out that there was a WMUR article that came out yesterday about how Dover is partnering with a bank, a credit union, to allow for better financing for ADUs in particular. I think the private market is working with the public sector in such a way that I think we're all moving in this direction where people have the right to do what they want on their own property. I think municipalities, if they want to preserve that single family neighborhood, this bill still does that. I think we're striking a really good balance here. So I think this is a good bill that we should vote for and try to get done. Go ahead, Representative Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The half acre was very intentional, as Representative DiLorenzo commented. I've been working for about 2 years on this bill, and in total about 4 years. And I solicited the input of the Municipal Association, of numerous planners, not just my own town's planner, but Durham's planner. And it was the consensus between the planners that I consulted that the half acre was good. And these are towns that are relatively dense. I also live on a half acre lot, and it has outbuildings, 2 outbuildings. And where I live is not a full ADU. It's kind of like an unofficial ADU, but it doesn't have a kitchen, so it's not really. But it's still predominantly a wooded lot. It is overgrown and wild. And you would not know that it has all these. Now, we don't have ADUs in the outbuildings because the town won't allow that. But the neighborhood itself is highly, highly, highly desirable with very high values. And I don't understand the idea of these values going down because, as anyone knows, as any realtor knows, a property with an ADU, or in this case, perhaps 2 ADUs, is a much more sought after and valuable property. The value of 2 ADUs, of course, not only can you have your aging parent or your adult child living there, but you can still get rental income aside from that. So as has been pointed out quite fairly, I think we should always operate on the merits of the bill. I think this committee has worked very hard over about a year on this concept, hearing from every single corner of the advocacy world, from pro-housing and homelessness issues to builders and realtors and pro-business people, and everyone, pretty much every corner is in agreement that this is not just good, but needed. It's happening in other states. And the movement we've had from Fannie Mae in particular to ensure that the rental income for an ADU can be considered in a mortgage to buy a home has been quite good. With that, I would like to move the question.
So we're not allowed to move the question in committee. I'm going to let everybody speak first. But if you don't have anything new to add, I recommend you do not add anything new, anything else.
I was going to call a question.
Okay, we can't call the question. Representative Walsh?
One quick one. I'm not expecting to convince anybody, just to clarify a few things. I am not here opposed to the ADU statute that we have for all the reasons described on who it can help with your in-laws, with your kids, with the disabilities community. But in terms of the assessed value, I just want to clarify this. I don't think that the ADUs are going to diminish the property value of the house that's got them. It's the ones that are on either side of them. And I know, Representative, you said you hadn't had a case of this with an attached ADU, and I believe that. Why would you? Because they're attached. I see, and I'm telling you, you're going to see it, when they are single-family homes, behind single-family homes, people on each side of that are going to be complaining and seeking relief. Another thing this bill does not do, it says 1,000 square feet. Now, you would really want to see a neighbor go after the assessing board. What if it's 500 square feet, 2 floors high with a 12-12 pitch, shadowing the neighbor's pool? And I know that's the NIMBY argument, but these are real things. And I guess if you haven't been into building to see this for yourself, what building something here actually does to something over here. I'll leave it at that. Again, it's the expansion that I can't get behind, not ADUs in general.
Okay. Does anybody have anything new to add? Thank you very much. So we're gonna, I'm gonna have the clerk call the roll. On ought to pass's amendment, that's including amendment 1149H and 0730H.
Vice Chair Baruti,
Yes.
Representative McConkey,
Yes.
Representative Walsh,
No.
clerk votes no. Representative Yokella,
Yes.
Representative DiLorenzo,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Yes.
Representative Gibbs,
Yes.
Representative Damon,
Yes.
Chairman Alexander.
Yes.
8-2, measure passes.
Okay. So I'm gonna put this on the regular calendar. We're comfortable with that. Yes. I don't think, I object to it going on consent.
Minority report.
Yeah, Representative Walsh, would you like to write that?
Yeah, I was hoping to have them already written before I got here. When do you need it by?
So I'm submitting all of them probably by
Oh,
Tuesday.
no problem. But I was really hoping to go back to work when we get out of here.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right.
Yep, I have to as
Then I
well.
will.
Okay. So, Representative Reed, will you write the majority?
Naturally.
Okay. Awesome. So next I'm going to call on I'm going to open the executive session on HB 1215 again and call on Representative Wallace.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We actually have the amendment in front of us. As previously stated, this amends the exemption on existing plans from 5 to 10 years and provides appeal action through the zoning board of it through the fire and building code review board if the town does not have a building code review board, and makes all the rules and such in place at the time of issuance of the building permits, the only ones that can be imposed upon this. And with that, I move the amendment,
Okay.
1080H.
All right.
thank
So Representative Wallace, you move amendment, you motion ought to pass and move amendment. What was the amendment number again?
1080H. That's correct.
1080H. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Yokella. Discussion on this amendment. Representative McConkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could ask Representative Wallace. So I believe what I heard you say earlier when we started talking about this. So this subdivision, for instance, has been approved, and you're extending the time from 5 to 10 years. So the standards or variances were granted 9 years previous. No one could change that if zoning had changed.
Correct.
I'm in favor. Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Representative Yokella.
There was just kind of building on Representative McConkey's question. I'm more familiar with like ZBA because he was talking about like a variance granted would be allowed for 10 years, and normally believe that variances are for 2 years. And so, but I don't see any 2 years getting crossed out and going to 10 years. And so I wanted to get some clarification on what is actually, if the subdivision is approved, that seems like that would be for 10 years. But if there was a variance for, setbacks or whatever on a specific lot in that subdivision, that would still only be, that would need to be started within 2 years. Am I
No,
understanding that
We're
correctly?
not addressing variances. The variance would be associated with an issued building permit at that time. Okay?
Representative McConkey.
Thank you, and I misspoke with when I said that, so I apologize. I'm just making sure that if this plot of land was allowed with those setbacks and whatever it was at that point in time, that those would be carried forward, even if there was a zoning change that occurred within 9 years.
That is the intent and the whole genesis of this
Yeah,
bill.
I apologize for the confusion.
No
Thank you.
Any other comments on the amendment? Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed? All right, it's 9-0, so the motion carries. Is there discussion on the motion of ought to pass as amended? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to have the clerk call the roll.
Vice Chair Baruti.
Yes.
Representative McConkey. Representative Walsh.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Yokella.
Yes.
Representative DiLorenzo.
Yes.
Representative Reed is not here. Representative Gibbs.
Yes.
Representative Damon.
Yes.
Chairman Alexander.
Yes.
9-0.
9-0. I'm going to have Representative Wallace write the report. Is there objection to this going on consent? All right, so it's going to be on consent. Okay, so the last bill is, we haven't spoken about this a lot, but we've had a public hearing on this and we've had some feedback on it. Representative McWilliams has circulated an amendment titled Amendment Number 1148H. Is there a motion on this bill? And we'll discuss this thoroughly.
Can I move ought to pass on HB 1399?
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Gibbs. Okay.
And then I'll move also amendment to 2024-1148H.
Seconded by Representative Gibbs.
Okay.
So can you please explain this amendment?
So
And Representative McWilliams is here for support if needed, but I'm going to let Representative Yokella do it.
So this this language talks about that for 2 acres, or for lots with 2 acres or less in size, and for at least 50% of the lots in the municipality zoned for single-family residences, they would essentially be allowed to allow 2 residential units allowed by right. And then that is, lines 5 through 9. And that's essentially the main thrust of this bill. And then everything else is exceptions. And saying, it can't require demolition and it can't require, if there's if there's like water issues that they, in the municipality and they don't have the capacity for it, that this unit, expansion to 2 units would be able to be disallowed for 10 years so that they can address those, sewer and water capacity issues on their, in their, if they have a water and sewer, municipal water and sewer, so that they can address those. Yeah, so I think that like there's just a whole host of these like exemptions, and I believe that most of these exemptions to the 2 residential unit are specifically, and the reason why this bill is so long is specifically because of people bringing up situations where it's not appropriate to be doing these 2 automatically allowing the 2 residential units. And so obviously these that those exemptions were considered by the prime sponsor and put into the bill, and that's what you have in front of you.
Okay. Representative Walsh.
Thank you. I might as well just speak to the issues I have with this now. First of all, I have no issue with duplexes. As a matter of fact, most of my town is medium-density residential, which allows them, and we have no problems. I'm specifically just talking about the writing or the language in this amendment, which essentially would become the bill. I guess the biggest problem I have is on page 2, paragraph 4, lines 7 through 13. If a town does not have adequate water or sewer capacity to allow this development in parcels subject to municipal water and sewer, proposed housing developments may be disallowed for 10 years. So you can say the 10 years is giving the town time for a capital project, which may be outrageous to perform. What happens if the town doesn't do it? Now they have a right to build these things without water and sewer? I mean, there's a huge hole in what happens here. And the reason I say this, these can be huge capital projects. And this is a one-size-fits-all again. To give you an example, Hooksett was created in 1822. And up until last year, we didn't have water and sewer on the west side of the river. So that's what the problem with one-size-fits-all. Maybe it's a small project, but it could be a large one. This doesn't address that. So, I mean, I have others, but that's the big one for me.
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in reference to the previous comment, and again, I'm not putting down the concern that's been expressed. I understand that it is definitely a real concern, but I have 2 points to raise. One is that within 10 years, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on these issues, but within 10 years, it might be possible to make an adjustment to water and sewer capacity that did not require a major neighborhood-wide capital project. The other is that you mentioned that in Hooksett you did not have water and sewer on the west side until very recently. But as I understand it, and I used to live in Hooksett, although not on the west side, that people did live there. So it is possible to live without city water and sewer. And I say this because I grew up where we had no city water and sewer. And so long as my family lived there, we did not have it. And the reason that we never had it, even when the whole rest of the 40 square mile township did have it, was because we lived on the other side of the New Jersey Turnpike from the rest of that 40 square mile township, and nobody was willing to expend the tax money that would have been needed to drill underneath the turnpike and extend the pipes out to where my family lived on the very edge of the township. So our family had to deal with a septic system and a well for all the time that we lived there. And I'm sure that Representative Walsh was not suggesting that it's impossible to live without city water and sewer. I'm just bringing this up because I have the personal experience of living without it.
Representative Walsh.
Yeah, and again, I'm not going to belabor. I'm looking at the language. If the municipality has proven through an engineering study that it does not have adequate water or sewer capacity, nothing's going to change in 10 years if the engineering study provided that, except you could be pushing municipalities into spending a lot of money to solve a project. The problem I see is that the bill or the language is silent on what happens after 10 years if the town hasn't coughed up the money to fix the water and sewer issues. And interestingly enough, on the west side of Hooksett, the municipality still didn't have the money to do it. It's actually the water and sewer is being put in as we speak by being funded by a developer who will again then get repaid for the increased taxes. It's a developer funded TIF. What could possibly go wrong? We'll stay tuned on what happens when this one's done. And I said most of our town was medium density, except the west side, which for the sewer and water reasons is why it's low density over there. Thank you.
Representative Viocello.
Thank you. And I find it interesting that the Representative Walsh focused his efforts on this line 7 through 13 because it was exactly the same language that I was working that raised my hairs on previous amendments and was actually changed yesterday to what we see here today because of some of those concerns that I raised last week with this bill sponsor. I do agree that it is silent on the language as far as, is that lot? So we're talking about one additional unit on a lot that already has one unit. So that would be one more, let's say, connection or capacity flow, if they're using the same connection, going through to the sewer and water. And it does say that, the municipality is allowed to say, okay, this one more connection or one more, residential unit getting pushed onto our water and sewer is not allowed for 10 years. And then on line 12 and 13, it says, notwithstanding the sewer capacity, so you might be disallowed just based on the sewer capacity for 10 years. But then once you are no longer disallowed based on the sewer capacity, obviously you don't want to just say, hey, if you have this engineering study that you can just sit on your hands and never do anything about this engineering study forever. There needs to be, the town knows that there's an issue and they need to be planning and moving towards with addressing that issue. However, so I understand that there needs to be a deadline and essentially saying like, hey, once the 10 years is up, they are going to be able to, if they can meet the other state requirements for water and sewer. And that may be that property now has to have a septic and well in addition for that additional unit and not actually hooked up to the water and sewer for that land. But they still need to actually have a plan to solve it. It's saying that you still have to meet the other regulations for water and sewer. So they don't get to, just, go to the wild, wild west once the 10 years is up. But I do think that this puts kind of like, I think some pressure on the municipality to try and address it and not, if they know that this is an issue, that try and address it in 10 years. And if it can't be addressed, then the person that is trying to put that second unit, that they are going to have to find a way to be able to have that second unit that meets the state's regulations for water and sewer. And I think so. I think that kind of threads the needle as far as being pushing the municipality, but not mandating that they actually do that. Complete those increased capacity requirements within the 10 years. So,
Okay.
thank you.
I have a question. So, Representative Walsh, based on your experience on planning board, I have a question regarding page 2, lines 14 through 18, that says that a municipality may deny a proposed housing development project if the state makes a written finding based on preponderance of evidence that proposed housing development under this section would have specific adverse impact on public health. So the way I read this is, would you be able to deny it if the sewage infrastructure was not good enough and it would damage the entire system and provide like adverse effect on the rest of the neighborhood? It says provided there's no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate it. So like feasible means to me like it's too expensive, it's not feasible at this time. So that's the way I read that part, right? And maybe we can adjust the language a little bit, but economic feasibly, but also I see like the infrastructure. Yeah, the infrastructure isn't good enough for the proposed expansion.
Well, to answer your question, yes, they can. Obviously, every system has a capacity, whether it's supplying water or removing waste. They're built for a certain amount of cubic feet. So
the municipality could still deny.
now that's what I'm reading now, just to see if section or paragraph D would supersede number 4. Let me read it again.
Well, I see. It says if the state makes a written finding, but maybe if we change that to municipality makes a written finding based on, an engineering report or something that they get. Go ahead, Representative Walsh, real
If
quick.
you don't mind, but I mean, it's not often, and again, I'm just looking at the way this is written. It's not often that you have one paragraph just eliminate another. I'm really looking at the way this is written. Even though, if paragraph D could negate number 4, then why would we have number 4? I guess is my, it seems moot. Let me read this a little bit more. Again, my issues are with the way the bill is crafted.
Okay, so I'm gonna call on, if possible, Representative McWilliams. Can you please explain? Because you drafted this amendment during session last week. Right. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for giving this bill the time that it deserves to really talk about exactly what we're attempting to do. So as my co-sponsor, Representative Yokela, explained, the intent is to allow duplexes with a whole bunch of ways to exclude duplexes based on discussions that we've had with different participants in the process. So the two that we're really focused on right now are on page 2, paragraph number 4, and then subparagraph D under 4. So lines 7 through 18 is pretty much the discussion right now. And I just want to give you a little bit of background because I think it's important to understand where both of these are coming from. So to start with section 4, the engineering study, this really is for Nashua. I can see this also being for Hooksett, but we have a lot of representatives from Nashua who were very concerned with this bill's predecessor, which is the fourplex bill. We condensed and came back with duplexes this year. Nashua was very concerned because of their issues with sewer capacity right now. And so understanding that Nashua needs 5,000 units immediately, but will definitely need more than 5,000 units in the next couple of years, there's sort of this balancing act between where are we going to put them and how are we going to handle sewer capacity. And so having met with several reps from Nashua to talk about the concerns, it seemed as though a 10-year period for Nashua to figure out how to bond and address their sewer capacity was fair. It was enough time for them to be able to do it. And then going back to meet with my co-sponsor, Representative Yokela, to really talk about, well, what happens if they don't do it in 10 years? What happens if they can't afford to do it in 10 years? And so understanding that there needs to be a way for these duplexes to still go in to meet need, demand, desire, and address our housing crisis. The idea was, okay, if you can find a way that you meet state regulations, the last sentence, but does not address the water and sewer capacity issues, then you can still do it after the 10 years. The way I see this actually playing out, and I want to be very clear for the record, is that probably someone will say, I'd like to put in a duplex in Nashua, and the town will say, no, we have an engineering study, the clock runs. We have a 10-year clock starting immediately after they're rejected. In year 9, you're going to see a whole bunch more people jumping on the bandwagon saying, oh, I understand we have a 10-year clock, and we also would like to get a duplex as soon as this clock is up. I expect that Nashua would say, all right, we've done everything that we can. And depending on how things play out politically, there's one of two avenues. Either it's been addressed and it's resolved, and so we don't need to go further, or risk management. It hasn't been addressed, it hasn't been resolved. And Nashua says, we're getting a new engineering study now to see if anything's changed or if any of the small projects we've done in the last 10 years might change capacity. They do the engineering study, and for the subject lots, some of the subject lots, they're still not going to work. My envisioning of this is that would trigger another 10-year clock starting from the next rejection in year 9, moving forward again. So now we're talking a 20-year term where the duplexes just can't happen on certain lots because the parcels are subject to city and water and sewer. There's no way to do a well or a septic. It's a small lot. It's not possible. And so therefore those just don't work. But it's really in Nashua's court to make the decision as to whether or not they do the upgrades, they can afford the upgrades, or if they do another engineering study and kick that ball down another 10 years down the road. So the reality is not every lot is possible to do a duplex on. And I think this paragraph is kind of crafted to create that opportunity if it can exist. And if it can't, okay, we've considered it, we've run it through all the options, it just can't happen. And it is a balancing act between the city and the folks who want to do a duplex and maybe could do a duplex if the capacity was upgraded. And we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, some of the things that we do as a legislature are really meant to be a first pass, and we have been known to come back and change things several years later. I anticipate that some of the stuff that comes out of this committee may end up getting changed a year or 2 or 3 later because we're still figuring out what the repercussions are. So moving on to paragraph D, line 14. This is a separate consideration, and the reason this was in the original bill is really about environmental factors. So let's just say you're looking at a wetland, for example. So this would be something that's reviewed by DES. It will go to a council. They would consider whether or not you can do development in an area that contains wetland. And they may say, absolutely not. This portion of the site cannot have a duplex on it because it's a wetland, end of story. And that's the state's finding. So if it's related to something that the state reviews, right, because it's the state making the written finding, then that's sort of a higher level analysis than if it's the municipality's finding. I did not mean for D to be another bite at the apple for City of Nashua, and I don't mean for it to be read that way, although I suppose you could probably have Nashua bring in the state to do an analysis of their capacity for sewer and water. I think big picture, the goal here is to make sure that a site, if it really is environmentally a poor site, doesn't end up being subject to duplexes. And I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, are there questions? Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. Representative McWilliams, I just want to clarify something because I had read this as the 10-year window would be application by application, that is essentially duplex by duplex, rather than at year 9, a whole bunch of additional property owners coming in and wanting to add duplexes, because one additional duplex might not be a serious problem, even if the city is, shall we say, on the edge of capacity. One additional duplex might not be a problem, but 10 additional duplexes might be a serious problem. So was this intended to be application by application, duplex or duplex by duplex, or was it intended to allow a whole bunch of other applicants to jump in on year 9?
So the intent here in the plain language was revised to address this. It's on line 10, for a term of 10 years after the first proposed housing development. So just one application triggers the clock. And so that does create a situation where there is pent up desire and potentially lots of applicants in year 9. I'm certainly open to changing that if I could get some support from other members of the committee in order to make it more drips and drops rather than a deluge of applicants in year 9. If that would be something the committee would support, I could see it going either way. I don't have a strong feeling that we must allow a whole bunch of applicants in year 9 expecting a tidal wave. But in the same hand, it seems as though from an administrative perspective, if you are a municipality managing all of these applications, it would be easier to remember one date than hundreds of dates for the time period.
Yeah, and then you would get one engineering study instead of an engineering study every single time there's a duplex application.
Well, the engineering study is good for the first
Capacity,
date,
okay.
10 years, but
Okay.
then you'd have to keep, it just seems like an administrative burden, but I understand the desire not to create a situation where you have many applicants towards the end of the term because everyone's kind of sitting on pins and needles saying, what's going to happen? What are we going to do if nothing has happened yet by that year?
Okay. Other questions for Representative McWilliams? Go ahead, Representative McConkey.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the question. I'll finish on where we've started, and then I have a second question for you. So my concern when this hits the floor is I live in a town, and I don't have sewer and water could be in the towns I represent could be 10 miles away. Most of the towns have some central, but it's the rural is so much bigger. So the way I read this is I'm the only person that thinks this is a great idea. And I come to the town and I say, I want this at my property. And 10 years go by, and town of Wolfboro for a number of years, which is not my district, but very close, was at capacity and stopped all additions of anything. And that went on for 10, 15 years until they finally figured it out. But I'm the only person, and the town must expend a lot of money, millions of dollars, to connect to me. I don't think that I should be allowed to do that by right. So that's my first problem.
Can I respond to that?
That's fine.
So you don't, if you're the one who really wants to do this and you don't currently connect to municipal water and sewer, so you would fall under, on page 2, line 2, section 2, residential units connected to an on-site wastewater treatment system. So you would have your own septic.
I'm so glad you brought me to that section because that's question 2.
Okay.
Section 2, residential units, and I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to be behind here. Residential units connected for on-site wastewater treatment, as it's written, documentation from a permitted septic designer that the septic system is adequate for the capacity of the proposed development. You did a lot of work, you got DES involved, but we didn't go far enough. In my opinion, that should read, for residential units connected to an on-site wastewater treatment, the owner will be responsible to have a New Hampshire permitted septic designer provide an NHDS subsurface construction approval for the increased use. Said septic system must be installed prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit. So going back to, it's not enough to contact a designer. The design, and this has been a lot of the rub about the first ADU bill. The first ADU bill is the only regulation in the state that says I want to add on to an existing use I have, but I don't have to build anything until it fails. So that got through, that's been passed, that's part. But I'm saying if I'm out in the country and I want to do it, I would agree with you, but I should have to provide to everybody that documentation that could happen. So let's say I have a lot that I cannot do that on. Let's say I've got a steep lot, I'm too close to the water, There are wetlands on that property, which precludes me from getting that state approval. So I can't get that. So now I want the municipality to bring me sewer and water. I think that's a great burden on municipalities, and I think we're going to lose the votes we need in the House.
So to be clear, to respond to that scenario,
Yep.
I think it's already been ruled out that you cannot do the needed septic on that site. It's too sloped, it's too wet, whatever the issue is. It's not a possible site. On line 8, where we talk about adequate water or sewer capacity to allow the development in parcels subject to municipal water or sewer. So unless your parcel is currently subject to
Okay.
municipal water or sewer, I don't believe it rises to the level of demanding that 5 miles of water and sewer run out to your sloping parcel that currently is a septic parcel, because it's not subject to municipal water and sewer.
Okay.
I suppose we could change that to currently serviced by if subject to isn't clear, but the intent here was never to trigger additional millions to be expended by a municipality for someone who's looking for a back door to get their duplex.
Okay. Would you, if I could, would you agree to additional language in line 2?
Yes, I love the proposal that you gave me. If you have that written down, I think that that's a fair amendment. I'm open to other committee suggestions, but I think that that is very fair and addresses the concerns we've seen with ADUs with preliminary language not really working out in the real world.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Representative McWilliams? Representative Gibbs?
Thank you. This isn't actually a question on the septic systems and so forth. Although I agree that what was just suggested is probably an excellent change. But I think that there's one additional thing that hasn't been considered, and this would make more sense actually if there were a group of delayed additions that would be coming in at the end of the 10-year period, and that is that. And again, I'm not an expert on this kind of thing, but if an additional group would be coming in, say, I don't know, 20 delayed additional developments would be coming in at the end of the 10 years. The taxes of those property owners would rise. And might it be possible for the city to bond its capital improvements on the basis of the fact that when those additions were added, that additional taxes would be coming into the city?
I do believe that that is allowable and a city could choose to do that. I do want to draw your attention to page 2, line 5, section 3. A municipality may charge impact fees for new connections to municipal water and sewer services. So I would expect that there would be a cost passed on to each of these new proposed duplexes where there needs to be an upgrade or a connection for the first time.
Do you have a question? Representative Ochello, is that a question? It's not a question.
No.
Okay, are there questions? Okay, so thank you,
Thank
Representative.
you.
Yeah, so that's my question. So Representative McConkey, the last day to act on bills not in a second committee is next Thursday. So we can either finish chatting about this and maybe amend it a little bit, and then we can have a quick exec at lunch during session if you propose to do that, or we can stick around here. So it's up to you, up to the committee. Yeah,
I'm okay either way.
okay. Any other discussion on this amendment?
Is that enough time? We do a session next week?
I know Representative Walsh wanted to get back to work. Take that into account.
Volunteered to do this, I do what I have to do. Thank you for your concern.
Of course. Okay.
Also
Are there other? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is Friday, that's true.
What?
you're gonna be over.
Oh, yes, that's
It's gotta be done by really Wednesday.
All right, so we can watch this right now to OLS.
The last day to act. Last day to act on House bills not in a second committee is Thursday, March 21st. Oh, hold on. Last day to report is the 21st. The 28th is the last day to act.
Next Wednesday is gonna be. That Wednesday is Friday.
So I guess let's see if OLS can get that language quickly. I don't want to break for a long lunch. I want to just get it.
21st is Thursday,
Yeah.
so that's the section. So we'll be all right to do it at lunchtime.
It wasn't noticed. It wasn't noticed.
Yeah, it's not on the calendar for next week, though. The calendar's out yesterday.
No, I can announce an exec during session. Because every representative is supposedly there. Right? I believe I can announce an exec during session.
I believe that has happened.
How about email?
Mr. Chair,
I think we should.
Mr. Chair, I think you need to call the House Clerk immediately.
Yep, I'm going to call it. Okay, we're going to recess for 5 minutes. Okay, so we're going to recess. We're going to wait on an amendment. It shouldn't take long, so I'm thinking hopefully by 12:15. But in the meantime, the Republicans are going to go caucus and LOB 300. Okay. All right, welcome back. Unfortunately, I have to recess until 1 o'clock. We're waiting on an amendment from OLS. So until then, we will not be execing, but we should finish up the bill right at 1 o'clock. Okay, welcome back, Special Committee on Housing. I'm going to reopen the executive session on HB 1399, and I'm going to call on Representative Yokella to rescind his motion on the previous amendment and offer amendment number 1157H. Representative Yokella,
So moved.
is there a second?
Representative Gibbs, do you second?
It's in your email.
Then I don't have to redo my document. Thank you. It's in our email. Yes, as verified by Representative McConkey.
Representative McConkey, can you talk about the change that was made in the amendment?
Thank you. Expanded the language of the original word.
Just put your mic on.
Expanded the wording on page 2 to instead of having to consult with a septic designer, if I remember right, I don't have this in front of me, to require that the owner obtain a construction approval from a permitted septic designer for the property. And construction approval means the septic design has been submitted to the department and that the new loading is under consideration. They agree that a new septic system could be built on the property. And then I'll go to my line 2, residential units connected to on-site wastewater system. The owner shall provide proof of a New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services subsurface construction approval for the increased septic loading. So you know that the lot will handle whatever is being proposed to be built. And upon the department's issuance of approval of the septic system operation, so it's a two-part process. You need a septic design. This is the property, and the property will hold it. And part 2 is they need to build it, put it in the ground. And when it's in the ground, the state will come by and inspect it, and it'll be issued what they call an operational approval. So it's a double check to make sure that the homeowner puts it in the ground and it's approved for operation before the town gives them the occupancy permit. So it protects the environment.
Representative Walsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is for Representative McConkey. Thank you for that language, and I'm just asking a question. Notwithstanding paragraph 2, or subparagraph 2, if paragraph 4 is still there, and I thought this whole thing was assuming that the subject property did not have the capability of a new septic system or well. I thought that was the reason for paragraph 4. Just because paragraph 2 is there, why would not paragraph 4 still kick in terms of responsibility of the municipality?
Well, paragraph 2 has to do with properties that aren't connected to city wastewater and sewage. 4 has to do with properties that are connected.
The sponsor of the bill previously pointed us to what is now line 9, where it says subject to municipal allows this development in parcels subject to the municipal water and sewer. So if they don't have sewer and water, then they would be covered under subsection 2. If they do have it, they would be under subsection 4. And then if the state finds that there's an issue, then that would be D. So there's hopefully all 3 of those are independent of each other.
Go ahead, Representative Walsh.
Thank you. Maybe this is just a dawn breaking over Marblehead. Subparagraph 4 did not change. So That's also for areas that do not currently have municipal water and sewer. That's the whole reason for the term up to 10 years in the denial. But it still says that after 10 years, nothing changed in it, then they will be able to build by right. And I thought that's what the prime sponsor said as well. This is assuming that there's no capacity on the site for personal water and waste systems, which I think they can do now.
Representative Wallace, do you have a point?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was discussed previously today in committee that the subject to municipal water or sewer was synonymous with connected to. We did have some discussion about changing that language, but apparently that didn't occur. I'm fine with it the way it is, but that's, subject to, again, is analogous to connected to. And 10 years hence, if we still didn't have the capacity and there's no viability for an on-site septic system, the expansion could not be undertaken. Is that correct, Representative McWilliams?
Representative McWilliams, can you clear this up for us, please? And then I'll call on the committee members that want to speak.
Thank you for the question. So we discussed before the break that subject to on line 9 related to municipal water and sewer would mean that a property currently has municipal water and sewer. You are subject to for the property you own. You're connected. So it's really a capacity question, not a bringing in new lines. So the example that Rep. McConkey brought up, I believe, was that if you had a very rural site and you were trying to get the city or the town or whatever to connect a mile's worth of pipe to you, you could not use Section 4 to demand that they would bring that to you because you are not currently subject to. Does that clear this up?
Thank you. It does get me closer. One more scenario, though. What if a lot, if we're saying that subject to municipal water means it's going by you on the street, and what if your lot was not suitable after perking, et cetera, or even large enough for personal septic and water for the duplex, if the capacity is already beyond on the municipal end, then still we have the 10 years, which to me would still be compelling to the town to make the improvements to get that approval there.
That would be in that situation where you've purchased a lot and water and sewer run by the lot, but you're not currently connected because it's an empty lot, right? So you've applied, you want to put a duplex on that lot. City responds, no, we have an engineering study that says we cannot, our capacity is not good enough. 10-year clock runs. At the end of the 10-year clock, under this bill, it says all previously delayed housing development projects must be allowed by the municipality by right after the expiration of the term. So you still get the hookup after 10 years, but you're still subject to state requirements regardless of what the municipality says. So if there's a state reason for no, Section D or last sentence of 4, then you still could get kicked out and not be able to. So that is a piece of it. And yes, in that example, an empty lot that has sewer and water running past, you would have a 10-year clock from application once you're rejected.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. Representative McWilliams, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier I had understood you to say that if at the end of 10 years there was still not sufficient capacity for water and sewer for the proposed duplex, and if it would not be possible to set up a private well or a private waste disposal system, that it could be denied for another 10 years, that another 10-year clock could run?
So we talked about getting a second engineering study, which could indeed trigger a second 10-year clock and would probably in year 9, when the municipality sees an uptick in applications, they would go get another study because the intent would be we need another 10-year delay. I'm just talking about a hypothetical here. Ideally, the municipality has figured out a solution to capacity issues, but if they haven't, this is one thing a municipality could do is get another engineering study, which would cause that 10-year delay for the next clock to run from the first proposed housing development under the new engineering study moving forward. So it effectively cuts off any more more applicants after the new study. So we talked about the administrative load, where every time somebody tries to get a duplex and they're told, oh no, we can't, we have an engineering study. Administratively, I suppose the municipality could be getting new studies every year. So they have literal 10-year clocks running from 2024 to 2034, from 2025 to 2035. They could do that. It's just a cost and a load on the municipality to keep delaying by 10 years these waves of applicants. So there are many ways this could play out. I think the intent here is to at least put some teeth in it, to at least show the municipality that the state is serious about allowing duplexes and that you have a 10-year window, but then you must allow all previously delayed under that 10-year window by right. There is still an exception for the state issues. So if there's a greater picture problem, I'm still seeing there may be an opportunity for the municipality to reach out to the state and say, review our capacity. Where are we at this? Is this possible? Is this not feasible for us to upgrade our capacity? And I suppose, as often happens here, this could be subject to a court case where we determine whether or not it was feasible for the municipality to upgrade or not. I don't want to do that. I don't want to kick it to the courts. I'd rather have good, clear language. But this is, once again, threading the needle, trying to find something that can meet both getting those units that we need in municipalities that don't currently have the city water and sewer to service those properties, and also making it very clear that you can't keep kicking the can for 10, 20, 30 years.
Follow-up question? Okay, and I understand certainly the desire not to keep kicking the can down the road, but if at the end of the 10 years there were a new engineering study which said that for whatever reason it was still currently not feasible to provide water and sewer, that would start another 10-year clock.
Yes, it
And
would.
so the development still could not go in as of right if in fact the water and sewer was not feasible at that point.
The new clock could not, the old clock can.
Okay, but
Under this,
but the actual development, okay, I have a house and I want to turn it into a duplex, okay? And I put in my application and the municipality says it's beyond our water and sewer capacity. And they get an engineering report that says our current capacity will not provide for this. So then we have a 10-year clock. And for whatever reason, the city has not been able to resolve the problem. I would think that they should be able to within 10 years, but assuming they had not been able to within 10 years, and they then get another engineering study, can I then, as of right, put in my development or not? If a new engineering study says it's not feasible, we still don't have enough capacity, what
under the
happens?
scenario that you have described, you fall under the first engineering study. Your clock started, well, the clock started when the first proposal under that engineering study went in. When those 10 years are up, you're allowed to do your duplex. Even though it will increase capacity on the municipality that has already told you it can't, your 10 years are up, you're allowed to. But the new engineering study is for new applicants.
Okay. Representative Walsh.
Which line allows the municipality to create the second engineering study? I guess there's nothing to stop them in current law somewhere, but I guess my fear is, well, go ahead, if you can answer that one.
Nothing in this law prevents a municipality from getting an engineering study related to capacity for sewer and water every year, every 6 months, however frequently that municipality feels they need to do that. There is nothing in this law that prevents them from doing that.
Thank you.
Representative Ocala.
Thank you. I think that it would be just the engineering study that they are using to disallow, right? If they're saying this engineering study is the one that I think that every single applicant from the first applicant to 10 years from that first application would be covered under that first study, and that at 10 years and 1 day, they would be able to deny upon that new study that they got, let's say in year 9. But they wouldn't be able to apply to people in year 9 because they are currently under the within the that 10-year window as far as because all previously delayed housing projects essentially from that 10-year window should be allowed and under the language in 11 and 12. And then at 10 years and 1 day, they could have a new engineering study that starts that 10-year clock again for those new people. Do you see what I'm, is that, am I
you're
reading that correct?
I think you're reading more into it than what it says, unfortunately, or fortunately, either way. I think you could argue it either way. I think you can have an engineering study dated, let's just say the date is today's date, okay? So it's the Ides of March 2024. We have an engineering study. Monday, someone applies to do a duplex. They fall under that engineering study, okay? Then next month, on the first of the month, we commission a new engineering study with a new date. If there is a new applicant as of the 2nd of next month, then that new applicant falls under the new study.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think you're reading more into it than is there, because I think that the application is all based on the that the 10 years is based on the first denial. So if you got an engineering study today that says you don't have any capacity and you didn't get a request for 15 years and then you said, hey, or however long the study is valid for. Let's say it's 1 day less than the study is valid for. Let's say in the hypothetical, the study is valid for 5 years, or 10 years. I have no idea. I've never seen one of these studies. So the day before that study is no longer valid, you get an application, you could deny based on that application, even though it's 10 years old or whatever the case, 9 and 364 days old, you could deny under that, and it would be denied for 10 years under this, even though now that study is no longer valid because it is following 10 years after the proposed housing development, not 10 years after the study. It's 10 years after the denied proposed development. So that would essentially grant them 20 years, even though their study is only good for 10 years. And so I think that it's all based on this time frame of the first proposed development, and the second and the third and the fourth, and all the ones that are in that 10 years are all denied automatically or disallowed by the municipality automatically, is my reading of this language. But, that's
So
my
in the real
interpretation.
world, you're going to have capacity studies and you're going to have changes in capacity over the course of 10 years. That's just how this works, is that there are upgrades to the system, roads get torn up, pipes get replaced, resized. So it's not stagnant. It doesn't stay the same. If you were to commission another study, the data would be different because things are changing with our water and sewer where we have them, and that data is constantly in flux. So it doesn't stay the same for 10 years, is my point. Your data is no good if you were challenging it after 6 years or asking for a new study.
Representative Gibbs.
Thank you. So increasing the capacity would not necessarily require a huge neighborhood-wide capital project. Increasing capacity could result from, say, the process of repairing some very old pipes and putting in some larger pipes. That conceivably could happen, and that would change the level of capacity along that particular street.
Yes.
Okay. Are we all set with Representative McWilliams? Yes. Okay. Thank you. All right. So is there a discussion on this amendment? It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on it? Representative Walsh.
Just one, and I'll keep it brief. I know we're some are under a lot of pressure to come up with solutions, but I hope we're also in favor of passing understandable law. And with the 10 of us in this room, we're still probably not in agreement of what actually this does. And nothing argumentative, but even the prime sponsor says there are many ways this could play out. And this is all like threading a needle. So if we're going to start imposing mandates on our municipalities, I would hope that the language we would be telling them what to do is a little clearer than this. So for that, I'm not going to be able to support this amendment.
Anyone else? All right, is the show of hands okay for the amendment? All right, all those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay, so it passes 9-1.
9 to Bert.
9 to Bert. Shout out. All right, so now we're on the final ought to pass as amended with amendment number 1157. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Who's made that motion?
Motion by Representative Yokella and seconded by Representative Gibbs. Representative Brody.
Yes.
Do you have something to say?
Oh, no, I thought he was calling a roll.
Oh, okay. So with that, the clerk will call the roll.
Vice Chair Barudi,
Yes, again.
Representative McConkey,
Yes.
Representative Walsh,
No,
Clerk votes yes. Representative Yokella,
Yes.
Representative DiLorenzo,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Yes.
Representative Gibbs,
Yes.
Representative Damon,
Yes.
and last but not least, Chairman Alexander.
Yes.
9-1, measure passes.
All right. So I'm going to leave that on the regular calendar as well, as I think Representative Walsh made a good point that there's a lot of explaining that we need to do on this bill. So
Will they be
will you write a
yes,
minority report?
there's some splaining to do, yes.
We got some splaining to do. All right. Beautiful. So that finishes up our House bills. So these will not be on the calendar for next week. I'm assuming they'll be on for the 28th. So I'll send around an email. There's only 2 bills that we'll have on the regular calendar at this point, but I'll send an email around who's responsible for what on the floor if any of these are pulled off consent. So with that, I would like to get reports by like Tuesday at the latest. So if you have time to do that. So Representative Walsh, you have 2. Representative Wallace has 1. Representative Reed has 1. Representative Yokella has 1. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Cool.